You may have heard me talk about in previous episodes my experience with plant medicine. Extremely profound, life-changing experiences. Ones that helped make my relationships with my wife, with my kids better. But since then, I've been really wanting to sit down and just kind of dig a little deeper into what plant medicine is, to maybe support you all in better understanding it and maybe even finding curiosity to explore it yourself. That's why I'm so excited. Our next guest is a deeply rooted guide in the world of integrative ancestral healing. Sita Ramya is a trauma-informed spiritual practitioner weaving together decades of work in somatic healing, plant medicine, and ancestral wisdom. You know, honestly, some of this work is probably the most ancestral medicinal work you can find. It's rooted in nature. Welcome back to Everyday Ancestral. I'm your host, James Berry. Please enjoy my next guest, Sita Ramya. Let us know what you think. Talk about kind of the law of attraction, because when we first met, the catalyst for our conversation was that I had read that book that you probably know, but I'm skipping on the full name, but it has to do with the serpent and the DNA or something.
That's exactly by Jeremy Narby. I'm skipping on the name too, but it was like the first book out there that really talked about his experience in the jungle with the Ashaninka.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that was my first exposure to plant medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And what's so fascinating, so I had that ceremony that I did with you. That experience was profound. I was not able to do the 2 days. I was only able to do one, but absolutely profound. Then I haven't touched this stuff. I haven't done any other ceremony since.
Mm-hmm.
And recently got in with a functional doctor here who's been really doing deep dives into plant medicine and for the last few years. And he has brought me into some of his ceremonies and have had additional, newer depths, newer profound experiences. And it just has made me want to really, that's why I reached out to you, because I was like, I really want to better understand. This is such ancestral practice. It's such ancestral medicine. And I would love to hear from your perspective as someone who's been working with it for so many years. What, 30 years? How long have you been working with it?
98.
Yeah. That's almost 30 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Let's start with the history of plant medicine. Can you share a bit about how it's shown up historically and just in general how it used to be used versus, I mean, we'll get to how it's used nowadays, but how it used to be used.
So I am not an authority. Let me just say this. I only know what I know. And there are so many multiple lineages of plant medicine practices that, let's just say for the purposes of this conversation, that span the Amazon in South America. And so many different tribes, and within those tribes, families and practices. Um, what I think everybody can agree on is that ayahuasca, the ayahuasca vine, the Banisteriopsis capi, has been used even before the chacruna, the psychotria, came online and they were put together. And the use that I am familiar with and the stories and the transmissions that I've received are based on my frame of reference, having studied with the Shipibo people, which are an indigenous group of the Peruvian Amazon. So I just want to clarify that. It's not the Iwanawa, the Hunikun in Brazil. And what I find fascinating is that all of these different groups are working with, communing with, in dialogue with, learning from ayahuasca, whether they call it yahe or any other name. So that to me speaks to the sentience or the presence of ayahuasca in a specific bioregion on the planet. What I know is that in many of the Shipibo lineages, while people in the communities drank ayahuasca, the primary purpose was for the Onaya, which is like you would think of as a shaman, but the shaman is a bit of a colonialist imposition of naming the Onaya, who is like the doctor, the curandero, the steward of the medicine and the realms of the medicine. So to drink this, the medicine, the uni, the ayahuasca, to have the vision, to be able to help the patient to be able to see what has to happen here, and to be able to work with the various energies, spiritual, that manifest as an illness or an imbalance. And the starting point always is in the non-physical, in the unseen to the eye, in the day-to-day, let's say, waking light. And then there is a prescription, if you will, for a bath or a vapor or a dieta or a lifestyle change, we would say now, for that person to feel better in whatever way that they are needing to feel better.
And that transmission comes from the plant, or
Well, it's a combination of the practitioner. I'm going to use the word practitioner because it's just, less specific, but applies to people who practice with this plant medicine um, in this specific lineage in my knowledge base. So the practitioner drinks the medicine. However, what comes through in terms of the capacity is not just based on, drinking the medicine in that moment, but the years of study and learning and working with a multitude of other plants that when we diet them, we receive the medicine of those plants, which then come through in the capacity to host that energy during the experience, if that makes sense. So the Onaya drinks the medicine, looks, and it's in real time, having the visionary experience, but also the helpers of all of the plants and access points that are in their, um, let's say, medicine chest based on their experience with them.
from your kind of knowledge and deep dive into ayahuasca, would you say that it's probably one of the oldest forms of kind of healthcare or medicine?
We'd have to define old. And because in this sense, we're talking about the Amazon, there's like very few archaeological remnants or records. And the Shipibo-Kanibo language and the Pinoan languages across the Amazon basin were not written languages. These were oral histories. So the archaeological record, if we're looking for like verification, um, is not there. However, if we talk to the elders and the teachers, it's always been part, for example, of the Shipibo culture. Like ayahuasca isn't separate from the culture, it's infused. And in fact, it is said and has been said that if you want to learn about ayahuasca, the Shipibo are the ones to go to. Like they are like the masters of this in that region. So
No, yeah.
so just to say, like, it's really sexy to say, "Oh, it's one of the oldest medicines ever." And maybe that's true, and maybe it isn't. And certainly there are various other archaeological records having to do with other plant medicine practices in other places in the world, across the Himalayan regions and Persia and Greece and so forth, that have better archaeological records because, they, were writing and there were buildings that were preserved. So, um, you know, I don't know. I suspect, and based on my sense, um, it is, but ayahuasca isn't a standalone. Ayahuasca is really profound. but we can't separate ayahuasca from all of the other master plants because ayahuasca provides access to the other plants that, are a part of this rich pharmacopoeia um, of the Amazon. And so these other plants are teachers, the plant teachers, the master plants that, get very refined in their service to us humans who go astray.
I want to definitely explore some of what the other master plants are, but I realize that a lot of people like this. The term plant medicine is getting thrown around a lot these days.
Mhm.
Is plant medicine to you? Is is ayahuasca the culmination of what you would say is plant medicine when we talk about it, or how would you refer to psilocybin, all these other things that people are now saying are also plant medicine, or what's your definition of plant medicine?
My definition of plant medicine um, is medicine from plants that provide healing and remedy. So it's not limited to fungi that have healing properties, which they're not plants anyway. So,
Right.
these plants that are behind me, are they plant medicine? Well, in a way, like, I don't know, it's medicine because they're providing oxygen for the air that I breathe, which I wouldn't be able to live without. So I think I have a expansive view of what plant medicine is. If I was at the Dubai airport a couple of years ago, and they had these atriums with like all these amazing plants inside, and I sat and I'm like, wow, like this feels really good. I'm in this long transit across the world and I felt like this healing and this calm, just from the richness of this incredible atrium of plants in the middle of an airport. So that's plant medicine. In the common parlance of social media and all of this, I think plant medicine is being used to refer to entheogens, like things that, are a way to know ourselves or that are expansive or transformative or that alter consciousness. And my um, definition is not limited to that. And primarily because I have had communications and experiences with plants that people would not call entheogenic, and they don't have the requisite alkaloids. However, when we come together with the plants and we do our work of being open to this non linguistic interspecies communication, there's so much medicine that is beyond sort of just this gross effect of drinking ayahuasca or ingesting psilocybin, um, or
Or
wachuma.
5-MeO, or
Yeah, yeah, and
yeah,
the 5-MeO, like even that, right? Like that is, referring to a synthetic compound. But I feel like everything, if it's a product of our intelligence, it's not natural. But we would not necessarily classify that as a plant medicine. Things like MDMA or 5-MeO or ketamine. Um, it doesn't diminish their potential for healing, given that they are taken or administered in right relationship and right circumstances in a safe setting. But they would not necessarily be plant medicines.
yeah. But yet, I think a lot of people are clumping it all together. At least to your point, how they talk about it on social media, and it makes me wonder because I had experienced in college a couple of mind altering things like acid and psilocybin. But that experience was very different than what I experienced with ayahuasca. And it was also very different from what I've experienced recently with this functional doctor. And it makes me wonder, is it just the vehicle, meaning, what you're what you're taking, or is it also, or is it more so the environment you're taken under? Is there a ritual to it? Are there people guiding you? Is there intention, or do you think it's just a mixture of the two?
Well, I think it's all of that, and it's like saying, as far as plant medicine, um, that Jack and Jill are the same person, right? So like ayahuasca is ayahuasca, and ayahuasca presents itself in many different ways. There's the Yahe tradition out of Colombia, and then there, are traditions in various tribal settings, and then there are emergent traditions where people are working with it in, let's say, more contemporary ways that are less traditional. So, um, I think that the set, our emotional set point, our physical set point, our psychological set point, our spiritual set point, the setting in which the experience happens, and the amount we take are all components. And there is an aspect to ceremonial work and ritual work that is a container set in a specific way, specifically for healing. And so, that plays into it too.
What got you on this path? Because I know it was reading that book that introduced me to it, but what brought you down this path?
So I had a yoga teacher um, in early to mid 90s. And I was sober from drugs and alcohol for like 11 years. And they mentioned ayahuasca to me. And I was shocked. I'm like, oh, that's just an excuse to use drugs. And then when I contemplated and I observed the yoga teacher's way of being in the world and what they did for their students and working in hospice and working with AIDS patients and this amazing work, I'm like, I don't know, but they don't seem like they're using drugs like the way that I did anyway. And so I sat with it for about a year. And then I said, I actually am interested in this. And then it was another year before an opportunity presented itself, and I was on a yoga retreat on Maui, and there was an opportunity. It wasn't connected with the retreat, but one thing led to another, and I had my first experience, and I really believe that in that moment, I even knew it in that moment. There was like my life before ayahuasca and then my life after. It was
I've heard that. I've heard that from many people.
it really was, and I felt very strongly called and very strongly drawn, and then, 2 years later, I traveled to the Brazilian Amazon, which started my journey, and I had, read The Cosmic Serpent, but it was there a year after that that I met Jeremy Narby and we became friends. And then he was actually the conduit for my journeying then into Peru, into some of the far reaches of the jungle. Um, First, staying with uh, the Ashaninka shaman that was part of the group in that book of the Cosmic Serpent, and so that was a couple of years before I then, met and started studying and learning from the people.
It's fascinating because more and more you're hearing about ayahuasca being a resource for addiction. And yet it's interesting because I think what you're speaking to is that here I had been an addict, I was sober, and and I was afraid to do something that was kind of like perceived as maybe being mind altering or drug like. So it's almost like we build these labels, and then there's lots of, while they're keeping us sort of safe, there's also a lot of fear around them, right? So how did, was it just sitting with it that kind of made you feel safe to delve into it? But like, or in general, when you're working with people that are dealing with addiction to, let's just say, alcohol or these modern addictions, alcohol or I don't know, cocaine or anything like that. Um, what what are you finding is helping people to take the leap and to see this is not the same as the thing that they feel like they're addicted to?
Um, well, I'll speak for myself to answer the first part of your question. And that was, it was such, it just, the whole evolution, like, was, I felt like in a way we would say, like, as a, in Buddhism, like it was my, karma to meet this person and for these, auspicious circumstances to present themselves. Because during that year, what I realized was the question was not, oh, that's just an excuse to use drugs. Would it be an excuse to use drugs for me? And it wasn't until, because there was no like internet and Google or any of these things. Even when I went to the Amazon, like there was no Google, there was no anything. I was just okay, here I go. Um, and so in answering that question, um, in the beginning, it was like no, because I don't want to use, I don't want to drink, and but I do want to improve the quality of my life, and I do know that while I might be sober, there are things that have not yet healed, and there are things that I have not yet released. And I knew that. And yoga was certainly helping, and some of my other practices, spiritual practices, were helping. And I felt more and more called and drawn. And it also, I'm like, wow, okay. I let them know. And then it was a year. Like, so it also helped me to cultivate patience and not perseverate on the thing. Like, okay, now this thing's going to fix me. Like, I'm available if and when. And so it was the beginning of a long journey of a practice of cultivating patience, which was um, not in my wheelhouse prior to that. And then now, I think that we're so blessed because there's so many communities of um, psychedelics in recovery, and there are meetings where people who are either exploring entheogenic substances or taking them, but they're also in recovery and are breaking free from more regimented or restricted 12-step programs that say, oh, anything that's mind altering is not being sober. And then there are pharmaceuticals that are okay, but entheogens aren't. And so I think that when somebody feels called or drawn or hears about it, at that point, I hope for them that they find their way to somebody who is going to talk to them and thoroughly do an intake or an assessment to make sure. Because I have found that there are people who open the door to psychedelics, and then they're consistently chasing like the big event, the high dose, and doing 20 grams of mushrooms. And, you know, not a problem. But, what it can do, it can also feed um, patterns where people are addicted to the cortisol or the adrenaline, and also perhaps a little less self-aware of their own desire to have a certain status or achieving. So there's not a one size fits all. um, and while I believe psychedelics, which promote neuroplasticity, and specifically ayahuasca does a really good job at that, it promotes neuroplasticity and helps to get us out of the default mode network and gets all of the regions of our brain working at the same time, much like meditation can. Um, that it's not for everybody. It's not the answer for everybody. And many people, let's just say, who, have been addicted um, or alcoholic may have physical. considerations on board as a result of the abuse of their body. So I think that, as I said, my hope is that they find their way to somebody, if they're drawn, who can guide them in a way that is helpful and reasonable and, can assist them in providing information so that they can make an informed choice about whether or not to proceed with um, consciousness altering uh, experiences.
Yeah, I think that's well said that there's still, despite the popularity and the trendiness of some of these things right now, that there's still no magic bullet or magic pill
Yeah.
um, that's going to work for everyone, everybody. Um, it is fascinating though, because when I had my experience with you, that was the first time I really got it. I was like, "Oh, this is plant medicine. Like this is medicine." And it was so clearly not a drug, at least the way that I had grown up, understanding what drugs were. Keep in mind that, we grew up with, we're of the age where, Nancy Reagan was, saying, just say no, so drugs were very like the idea of what a drug is and what it's labeled as, it kind of permeated our childhood, of anyone that's a certain age. And so I went in kind of thinking, well, okay, you can call it vegan or plant based. It's still, you're not eating animal meat. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of went in going, sure, it's plant medicine. Yeah, just like, but when I experienced it, I was like, oh, no, no, no. This is medicine. It was such a distinct difference. And so I would love to kind of help people understand what is ayahuasca, because you're talking about, let's go back to that idea that there's these other plants that you mix with it when you're creating ceremony. Can you kind of explore what if someone said, well, what is it?
Yeah.
So what is it? What embodies it?
Yeah. So we don't mix other plants with ayahuasca. What I
Okay.
what I what happens is we diet with other plants outside the ceremonial space for extended periods of time, a month, 3 months, 6 months, a year, to come to understand the medicine of those plants. And when we do, we receive the songs and the connection. Then in ceremony, um, the practitioner opens themselves to receive whatever needs to come through to assist them to be of service to the person that in the Shipibo tradition that they're singing to. So if they have dieted chuchuwasi or ohe or some of these other plants, those plants might come through while the practitioner is in the experience of ayahuasca to be of service, because let's just say that person is healing from drug addiction and ohe or alcoholism. And ohe is like this really powerful deep cleanser of any residual, any remnants of alcoholism, whether it's physically, spiritually, emotionally, energetically, or drugs and parasitic energies and parasites. Um, so that comes through in the in the realm of the medicine. Ayahuasca is just two plants, the ayahuasca vine and chacruna. Now, some
Oh,
people in some regions where chacruna is not native, it would be chalipanga, which is a different admixture plant. But those two plants together are ayahuasca. And it's really fascinating because ayahuasca contains harmine, harmaline, and tetrahydroharmine, which are beta carboline alkaloids that act as a temporary and reversible inhibitor of monoamine oxidase A activity and is a natural antidepressant. And pharmacologically, monoamine oxidase inhibitors were the first antidepressant, pharmaceutical antidepressant. But if we were to prepare a tea with chacruna, with the Psychotria viridis, and drink it, and it's rich with the alkaloid of N,N-dimethyltryptamine or DMT, the person would not feel an effect because our bodies are so brilliant the monoamine oxidase activity would neutralize it or metabolize it, saying, whoa, wait, this is foreign. But because that activity is temporarily suspended, the DMT crosses the blood-brain barrier and produces what in allopathic medicine is referred to as a psychotropic or a psychoactive effect. And in the shamanic spiritual practices, it's much more than that because now we're open to the teaching of this plant. And it's like the pump is primed to help us expand and have potentially a visionary experience, which may include visuals, or it may be an experience like you had, James, of I just knew. And if that's an insight, then that's a vision. And because there are a lot of, physiological, pharmacological things going on, which intuitively indigenous people without that language knew. They just knew. And so, um, you know, it's nice that we have science and we have assessments, and starting in the late 80s, these studies started happening. So it's great to know that, but there's something that can't be qualified or quantified through science, which is like, how is it that, for example, myself growing up on the streets of Philadelphia, in the inner city, like makes her way to the jungle? Like, how does that happen? So there's something that is, ancestral in that, it could be through many lifetimes or, many manifestations of this interdependent nature, of our existence. And then there is our capacity to surrender to having an interspecies communication, if you will, like receiving messages or maybe even expanding enough to have an experience of recognizing the plants as having sentience and being helpers and being teachers and being healers themselves and wanting to help us. We need a lot of help. Human beings need a lot of help. And so it's really quite profound. I think I may have gotten off track to your question, so remind me if I did.
Well, no, but we're just talking about like what is ayahuasca, but what's fascinating to me, well, let me first walk through and you can of course support it, but from my understanding and from what I've experienced is typically you're told to fast from animal-based products prior to ceremony, to not eat too much, to keep it pretty light. Then the ceremony that I did with you, it was in the evening, and then we sat, and I don't even remember how many people, but it's not a huge group. It's intimate, and then a lot of people purge. Right. Not everyone, but a lot of people then purge. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what that purging represents. But then also, you then do the ceremony, and it's however long, but then afterwards, you're still kind of told to not immediately go into eating too much food. And I think we had oatmeal, for example. We kept it very light. And we did it so long ago, this was an issue. But I know nowadays it's also like you're warned to kind of like not get too heavy into electronics, like not to kind of give some space between what you experience in modern life.
Yeah. So thank you. So the dieta in preparation for drinking ayahuasca, um, in the lineage in which I've learned, is no salt, sugar, spices, dairy, oil, caffeine, red meat, pork, recreational substances, marijuana, alcohol, pornography, sex, and masturbation. So it's not complete abstinence from animal products. Um, so, you could conceivably eat chicken or you could eat, a light white fish, which unfortunately is not really available in North America that hasn't been farmed. But like just as a counter to this, um, deep in the jungle over the course of, retreats, it might be like plantains and boquichito, which is like this little tiny fish with a million bones. And in order to eat it, it's very meditative. Like it's not like you have to,
Right.
take an hour to eat a fish this big. So
It forces you to go slow and be mindful.
yes, exactly. So there is another component to the diet because there are other plants that are incredible plant medicines, but they're not a fit with ayahuasca. So, like, it's not like a hard and fast thing. So, you know, um, that interfere not just physiologically, but potentially physiologically, but energetically, and they're just not a good fit. It's like if you were to put on an outfit and you're like, wow, that just doesn't go, right? Uh, so
That's not my color.
yeah, yeah. So so the idea is that we're preparing. From my perspective, the dieta is not an add-on, like, "Oh, I have to do this because 'cause I'm gonna go drink ayahuasca." The dieta is an opportunity to connect with my intentions. So, like, why am I going to this ceremony? Oh, because I want to work some more on my patience. I wanna cultivate patience, or I'm gonna release my attachments. So maybe I otherwise drink coffee and then I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna have but I'm not having coffee. I'm not having coffee because I wanna cultivate patience, not because I'm drinking
Yeah, kind of
coffee."
it forces you to face whatever it is you're trying to
Well,
work
I mean, it
on.
doesn't force you because some people could just, like, white knuckle it and not have coffee and not have sugar and not have the things, but as an offering, as a spiritual practice, "Oh, I'm abstaining from this because I am committed to this practice of releasing my attachments, of cultivating patience, of,
Mm.
letting go of jealousy or letting go of, the things that keep me from really being of, highest service to myself and others." And so the dieta is a time of contemplation. And certainly, if there are things that interfere with that, like electronics and too much engagement with the world, then it's a nice time to just like, let me hang back. The other thing is afterwards, after drinking ayahuasca, it's really nice not to dive too quickly back into our normal eating habits because the heaviness can like cut the experience, and we might really like have this like ongoing profound experience for a few days or longer afterwards. And most people will notice the minute they start eating the spice or they stop and have the hamburger that it can create a heaviness, and then it brings us down, which we have to come back down, right? We're living in the world, we want our feet on the ground, that to create a container for everything that potentially could emerge that's positive, to have a container and a space in which to emerge. Um, and because not everything happens in the ceremony, not everything happens the morning after, that like, wow, we start to contemplate, huh, now I remember that. What is the message there for me? What is the insight? Let me contemplate on that. But the minute we're back to doing all the things, we're very forgetful, and then we forget.
And why do you think the plant induces, or the purging? 'Cause
Yeah.
I know it's not for everyone, but it definitely happens more often than not.
So, so the purgative effect is primarily due to the vine, which is a really powerful antioxidant. It can have, up to hundreds or even 1,000 times the antioxidants as, say, green tea. Um, and it is a really powerful detoxifier. So that detoxification of the vine, and even when people purge physiologically, whether it's through vomiting or through profuse bowel movements or shaking or sweating, many people experience the purge as a release of that which no longer serves them, or habituated thought patterns, or ways of viewing themselves or their relationships or their biographical information. Um, And so many people, who purge, they feel really great afterwards. It's like, wow, like that I've heard this so many, that really needed to come out. And so, yeah, and this idea of cleaning and clearing is really big in the Shipibo lineage, and in fact, in the Ikaros and in the songs, there's so many variations on cleaning, 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 washing, cleaning, washing, cleaning,
Hmm.
in the songs, because so many of us, have so many things that we're carrying and things that we don't realize are obscuring our true nature, which is like the light that's in us. It gets covered over, and so, we wanna clean that, and we also wanna clean our organs and our blood and our nervous system and our bones and all these things too.
So this is what I've been thinking a lot about lately, and I feel like we've been talking about that book, The Cosmic Serpent, that book really highlighted because if I remember correctly, he was going to the rainforest to do one thing, but then through his conversations with the shamans and the different tribes, they had an understanding of medicine and science, the DNA. They had all this understanding. They just had different names for it, but they had a deeper understanding of these concepts than even non-tribal people did. And it their explanation for it was, well, the plants told us. It's in the plant.
Yes.
And that has really kind of like made me wonder because I'm always in my exploration of ancestral living and how we merge it, how do we get back in touch with all this innate knowledge we do have is if the plants have all that knowledge, don't we as well? Like, isn't it all stored in our cells? Isn't it part of when we breathe the air? Isn't it part of the the kind of ancestral knowledge that continues to get passed down cellularly, biologically? And so if so if the plant has that knowledge, then so do we technically. So in your experience, is that true? And then how do we get closer to our own innate knowledge of, for example, what we need to eat, how we need to be, how do we need to coexist in this life so that we're not just full of anxieties and like depression and all these things that are really overtaking our lives these days?
Um, well, first up, just to clarify, in the Cosmic Serpent, Jeremy was with the Ashaninka, like not different tribal people, but with the Ashaninka, specifically. And I say that because I don't want to us, as folks from the global north, just clump all indigenous people together, because you know even within, an Ashaninka community, there are individual people there, like, having individual experiences and their own individual and collective, heritage. And I believe that, um, yes, if the plants have this knowledge that has been passed on, from, like, from what we know on this planet in this iteration, from, like, that first single cell, organism till now. Um, the same is true for us. And I agree that if we are able to get out of the thinking mind and we're able to get out of this linear based approach to our incarnation in a body, then that's a first step. So it's kind of like it could be something as simple as you look at something or you smell something and you're like, "Ooh," right? You know it's a no. How do you know it's a no? There's something in you telling you that it's a no. So there are various practices, and I work with people individually and in groups in many different ways, um, helping us to learn the language of our body, which is the carrier of our consciousness, and therefore the carrier of the wisdom of everything that we have been and our ancestors have been and are to be. So There are things that we're already doing that we don't realize, like had a gut feeling about it. Like there's real wisdom in that. Or I just, it was just a no. And then we find ourselves going back. So I think that it's important to be reminded that the foundational tools are already on board, but we forget it. Or we recognize it and we do it anyway because our mind comes in and says, no, you should, because then you're going to look weird if you don't, and blah, 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 blah. And so quieting the mind and being open and willing to do something out of the ordinary, that's out of the ordinary for ourselves, is the first step. And my hope is that we can inspire people um, to do something out of the ordinary for themselves, whatever it might be, to be able to reconnect with who they truly are and tap into this lineage of their own ancestral knowledge and of our collective ancestral knowledge. And also to not feel separated, because when we're separated from the trees and the plants and the soil and the sun and the stars and the wind and the rain, then, when we perceive ourselves as separated, we are not, but then we have this perception, then we're trying to live in isolation when we are designed to live, and we are living interdependently. But then we stop paying attention to this interdependence and we think, I'm a solo warrior trying to get through my life. And um, from my view, like one of the reasons why we're here and are incarnated is to recognize that we're not separate.
Do you think ayahuasca is a tool towards supporting that? Because that's been my experience as of late is really seeing how connected we are through my
Yeah.
experiences.
I do, and I do because um historically, traditionally, in the people who um are companions to stewards of work with ayahuasca, it's done in community. It is not done in isolation. I mean, granted, if you're in a study or you're in a dieta or in the jungle for an extended period of time, maybe you drink on your own as part of the learning process, but it is, a communal embed. And I think there's a reason for that because the idea is that like we can't be healed unless we start with ourselves, but that is the pathway for our collective healing and our collective emergence and awareness of our interdependence. And, in this, common era, in the last couple 100 years, we've just become more and more isolated. And we co-created that too. And so we're in a time of isolation and we don't know how long that's gonna last. But like any other epoch or era, there are those who say, "Wait a minute, like this might be what's going on for the majority." Um, but I'm aware. I'm aware, and once we're aware, we can do what we can do, and then we can um, hold an intention to help others, to not force anybody to do anything, but it shows up. I believe, like how do I speak with my neighbor? How do I interact with someone who's providing me a service? How do I interact with my client or my customer? How do I show up with my coworkers? How am I in my family with my children and with my parents and with my extended relatives? Like that's where it happens. And how do I do my best to, live in a way that recognizes the interdependence of the natural world and the waterways and the mountains and the plants, all of the plants, not just the ayahuasca plants, but all of them, and the birds and the fishes and the animals and the insects and all of the elements of this Gaian ecosphere that we're living on right now.
It's fascinating to me in terms of that connecting point. Um, One of the things that I believe is a sign of like the interconnectedness of ayahuasca and the experience that people have with ayahuasca is something that I experienced through the ceremony I did with you, which is I saw these very specific kind of matrixy, very very clear images that were geometric. And then after the experience, I'm walking through the building that we were near, and I see all these pictures on the wall that I did not see before I went in. And I was like, wait a
Mm.
second, I saw that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And
So what,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So
what were those?
yeah, so these lines and shapes and configurations are called kuna. And so they're the visual representations of energy and of history and of stories. And it is a way of communicating non-linguistically when we look at the artistic representations of the visionary experience. And one of the articles I wrote like touches on this, and I think it's you can look me up and find it, but it's really a fascinating phenomena. Like people, like they can't put words to their experience, but then they look at and they're like, "Wait, that was it. That was it." So to me, that's evidence of this unique cosmology of ayahuasca. Because now it's like, wait a minute, we have a shared vision. What is that? And that is a testament to our interconnectedness and our interconnectedness beyond what we can see, but our interconnectedness in the unseen.
Yeah, yeah, I have to imagine that. Yeah, I have to imagine that's true.
Mm.
I wonder how you'll answer this. I've had a multitude of experiences where when I'm doing them, and then this even happened when I did ceremony with you, is something is talking to me and it's not me,
Mm,
but it's through me.
mhm,
And more recently, it feels like source.
mm.
How would you like if I were coming to you and we were having a one-on-one conversation and I was sharing, hey, this is what I'm experiencing, how would you respond to me with that? Would you say, "Oh yeah, you're definitely talking with source," or how would you interpret that connection, or is it more just, well, however I see it is what it is?
Well, however you see it is what it is, but however you see it is what has meaning for you. And like we are nothing but source. And in, the Buddhist tradition, we would say rigpa, the, original nature that is unconditioned. And then, it's kind of like a pointer or a pointer or a guide, like leading us to what might mm, allow us to recognize the truth of who we really are and what we really are. And for now, what I'll say is whatever way that voice or that information has meaning to you um, is what's most important. And
Mm,
also, to the extent that you feel like you are tapping into information that is going to improve the quality of your life and the lives of others. Like that's the barometer, not like a voice that
it
says, "Sell everything and go," build a tower someplace. Like to not get ahead of ourselves and and to still maintain discernment because it can be very enchanting. We see all of these things and then we think ayahuasca told me XYZ. So to also make sure to check in with whatever the voice is or whatever we perceive it is telling us, and verify it. Do an investigation rather than just take things at face value because it feels very, magical and mystical. But to actually
Yeah,
investigate,
that's definitely
investigate. This is what the Buddha said. Don't believe me. Do your own investigation. So,
I like I like that. Um, as we come to an end, you mentioned that you see your life as before ayahuasca and after. So in the last, 20 odd years since you've been doing this, and technically even in the last 12 or so years that I've seen you, what how have you changed? And even more recently, like, is through your work with it, how is it developing? Do you just keep going deeper? Do the layers just keep getting revealed, or where does the journey that you've been on, where has it taken you?
um, I think it has taken me closer to the awareness of, well, how little I know, number one. Um, from a day to day, in the last 3 years, I believe that it played a big role in coming to another medicine practice, which is that of the medicine Buddha and Soa Rigpa in traditional Tibetan medicine, which I've been studying in the Vajrayana, Tibetan Buddhist practices in the Utok Nintig, which is amazing to me because here's this other traditional medicine practice from the Himalayas on the other side of the world. And so it just keeps unfolding and keeps inspiring me. And I would say for me that I can't say, you'd have to ask the people that know me, but I feel better, and I feel like I'm a better person, and I am more committed to, um, my own self-care, and as a result of that, being able to, be of service to others. That the mask drops down in the plane and they say, "Oh, put your mask on first before helping anyone else." So, I feel like maybe the first, you know, 12 years were putting my mask on. And then, the next we're like, "Oh, okay, I have yeah, I think I have enough oxygen to help that person for 2 minutes." And so, I think it's leading me to continue to expand and not get boxed in because, it's easy to get boxed into, like, "This is the only way," and so I am so grateful to the plants and to the medicine for helping me so much to open my mind and open my heart and heal my body, um, and help to amplify my innate intelligence and connection to myself and to teachers. And the journey continues. And yeah, like there's not an end point. There's not an end point. It's like, yeah, just like this continuing evolution. And if I am paying attention and I'm diligent, and I put forth good effort, um, and I'm disciplined, then like not in the like regimented kind of way, but like I in a way that I want to be, and I maintain good practices, then the benefits are beyond anything I could say with this voice in this time. Like it's not something that really is easily translatable into language. Um, so for me, um, I guess I could say there were hints of it, but like the preciousness of this human life and this experience is astounding. It's so profound. And I feel like, you know, forget the external circumstances of, where I live or what I do and all of those things. I guess I could just say I feel better and I feel like I'm doing a better job at being human.
Hmm. Wow, that's lovely. I want to thank you for talking about this. It's a hard topic because a lot of, there are some taboo issue things with it. There's some legalities, I think we're finally at a place where we can actually more openly talk about plant medicine, but I know, back in the day when we've earth met, I mean, it was not talked about, and then if there was any kind of ceremonies, it was all hush hush, it was all very, don't reveal anything, all that, and I know that to a level that still exists, but it seems a little bit more mainstream in terms of that, "Hey, at least we can have the discussion. At least we could talk about this is not just a lumped in as a drug or anything similar to what people in the growing up in the 80s were programmed around, but that this is a modality, and when you're called to it, it's a potential place of awakening and healing in a different way than we typically experience with modern day tools.
Yeah, and just, side note, I grew up in the 70s. I'm a little bit older than you might imagine. And I grew up when we could still walk around, smoking joints in the park, and it was just like the tail end of the hippie era. And then came the war on drugs, and this is your brain on drugs with the egg in the frying pan and all of that. But yeah, I would say there still is good reason to be discreet, and some things that even I might not be ready or able to hear in a way that is, say, respectful or honoring of the information or the practice. So you use this word mainstream, and I mentioned earlier, like, not everything is for everybody. And I do think that there is a good reason, to be well prepared for whatever it is that we're receiving, and not to dilute it, and not to, um, turn it, not to commodify things. At the same time, the information and the teachings that we receive should be shared, whether people drink ayahuasca or not. And, like, how that's shared is maybe not necessarily even saying, ayahuasca taught me this or the plants told me this, but as I said, in how we show up. That's way more
Mm.
important than, you know, promoting the plants, let's say, because I think they know what they're doing. They're doing a good job promoting themselves and showing us.
Yeah, it's interesting thought, like, almost in a sense, like, do your work, show up in your best self, or show up in your higher self, but or whatever that means, because I don't mean higher in, like, judgment, I mean more just, do the best you can,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that we don't have to, like, that the experience or the ayahuasca plant or whatever it is, that it's not necessarily about that, it's about who we are, either from the experience or just in the world with it, in conjunction with it. It doesn't even have to mean that you've done it. It just means who are we within this current
Yeah.
state of affairs, and how do we mix with, like I love how you started this, which is, well, the plants behind me, how do I interact with those? Those are medicine too, and I think really what we're talking about is that this is maybe a possibility for certain people, but it's more important about what kind of mindfulness do we have in our day to day
Yeah.
with everything.
Yeah. How are we living our life? That's it. Like, are we doing, like, are we kind and to ourselves and to others? And
Yeah. Well,
are we
thank
taking
you
care
so
of
much for taking the time to have this discussion. I really I value your knowledge and your experience on this, and you really are a linchpin for me on this journey. As from our conversation that first time in Malibu at that party, to then my experience with you, to then just knowing just kind of being aware that you're there should I ever need you, and so I just really appreciate you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. And I appreciate you doing this podcast and, broadcasting, to those who are ready and able to hear. what is important to you in your quest to connect with and rekindle this ancestral wisdom that you astutely mentioned is available for all of us.
And now, if people want to find you just to learn more about your writings, about your experiences, how can they do that?
So, Sita Ramaya, Sitaramaya, .com. And the website
Good.
is, like, literally ready to be launched after all these years. I'm, like, finally getting with the the modern era, and then there's a way to contact me on the website, but I think it's gonna go live, like, in a few days. I have an old website that's up. It's just like a landing page. Um, and, while we've been talking about ayahuasca, there's so many things that I do in terms of, like I'm an SC practitioner, somatic experiencing, and so a Rigpa counselor and a Neijong yoga teacher, and like all of these things, and dietas and pusangera. So yeah. And the thing is, just like when you looked at that painting, like, like there was something for you. So all the things I just mentioned, like maybe you go to the website and there's just one thing that speaks to you. Like, yeah, so like so I hope to be able to provide things for people to contemplate and to think about and to read. You can also just Google Sitaramya Sita, and writing and articles and different things come up on the internet as a result of a search like that.
Well, thank you, and excited for what's coming for you in terms of this new work that you're doing, and look forward to reading more.
Okay. Thank you so much, James. And
Thank you.
what you're doing as well.
Thank you, and thank you all for watching or listening. It's such a joy to have these conversations with people like Sita, and to know that maybe it's going to affect one or many of you, and maybe this is the time you needed to hear it. Because the goal is to support your health and to help bring these beautiful ancestral, important ancestral practices into our modern life. So thank you again, and stay curious.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me on Everyday Ancestral. If you enjoyed this episode, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. You can find the show notes, links, and resources mentioned at eatpluck.com. That's EATPLUCK.com. And hey, if you know someone who'd get something out of this, share it with them too. Stay curious, live well, and keep it ancestral.